A little while ago I was contacted by Sterling Kit and they wanted to send me out some of their kits to build on the channel. I decided on this 4-cylinder engine kit which suited my channel the best and I figured would be the most fun for you guys to watch me build. Now on their website they have many other kits and styles available, so feel free to check that website out. It is www.sterlingkit.com. This specific engine that they sent me out came in 2 different colors, a rose gold type color and also a more gunmetal dark gray color, and I decided to go for the dark gray color as I thought that would be a bit more realistic and simply would look better on my shelf. So let's just take it out of the box piece by piece and see what is inside. So the first thing you come across when opening the metal or tin box is an actual instruction manual. On some of the pages it gives you a couple of tips and hints on how to install some of the parts and also what materials to use when. There is some lubricant included in the kit itself that is required for some of the parts, as a lot of these components are actually semi-functional for a display and instructional purpose. When going through the rest of the instruction manual, you can very clearly see that the instructions are laid out really nicely and give you a really good visual of how this kit needs to be assembled. It has a lot of text and other instructions that are very useful for the assembly process itself, and also all of the parts are numbered and so are they on the actual packaging itself. And when I say that this kit is actually functional, look at this chain. It is a completely realistic functional chain that is going to be serving its purpose as a chain on the actual engine itself. There are lots of pulleys. These are gold, some are red. There are some blue accents as well. And on the other layer inside of the packaging there are even more parts, including a small motor which will actually help turn and spin the motor. So like I said, in the instructions the parts are numbered and they are also numbered on the packaging itself, so you know exactly which part to use when and roughly where it is located inside of the packaging. And in the final level on the inside of the box there you have the biggest parts, mainly the engine block and the other huge components which all of the other smaller stuff needs to be assembled onto. This one has some holes in it so you can very clearly see the inner workings of the engine and all of the parts rotating to help give a better visual and also instruct on how these engines actually work in a simple manner. There of course are a couple of boxes included too. This one has some foam on it, and of course on the inside a lot of the components, springs and other stuff that needs to be assembled, with a lot of the screws in the second box in order for all of the parts to go and stay together. So like I mentioned, the engine is a bit of an instructional tool to give a really good visual on how engines work in a rough way. It is not a complete engine with all of the single parts in there and super detailed, but a lot of the general components that require an engine to work and also give the best visual are included in the kit and also assembled in a similar way that the actual parts are. A good example is the piston right here. It has a couple of parts that go together very similarly to the actual engine if it was a full-scale functional engine, and it's a really fun way to learn and assemble engines in a basic step-by-step way. With the first 4 pistons now assembled, and actually all of the pistons as it is a 4-cylinder engine, you can move on to assembling the rest of the parts together. You're using a couple of shims and also some screws just to put it together, and along with this you need to apply some lubricant as well, otherwise the engine will probably not sound as good and or function as well after you've finished the assembly process. During the assembly process, just like on an actual engine, be sure to test some of the components to see if they are actually still spinning freely. If they aren't, you might need to add some extra lubricant or just turn the screws back a couple of turns in order for it to free up some space and actually be turnable. Once the crankshaft is in place and all of the cylinders are of course in, screwed tightly down, again be sure to check if it is still working properly. You can then move on to the next step, and that is installing the spark plugs. After installing all of the spark plugs, you can move on to lubricating the head then with some more lubricant, and then start installing all of the valves, the springs, and tighten them all down with the rest of the components. With all of the valves installed and the top of the head now on too, you can move on to installing the camshaft and actually already see some of the parts functioning. Again, a bit of lubricant needs to be applied here, and then you can tighten all of these bolts one by one. Some pulleys need to be installed onto the camshaft as well, and these will need to be aligned for the correct timing at a later stage, so be sure to put them in the general correct place before tightening them down. There are some exhaust pipes included too, but I simply did not like the look, so I decided not to use these. You can use these, maybe even fabricate a custom exhaust, but I'm just not going to use them. Simply just installing this piece right here, as I kind of like the gold look, and it ties in with some of the other components which will be installed later, but the exhaust pipes just didn't suit my look or style that I was after, so I just skipped that step and then could move on to adding the feet to the oil pan. Now of course on a real engine these wouldn't be there, but for display purposes and actually having it stand up nicely, these need to be installed on the oil pan itself. The block could then be installed on top of that, and some other parts need to be put on too before putting the head on. One of the cool things on this kit is that there is a motor in here to help it spin and also make it functional. That needs to be covered up with a couple of parts to actually look like the starter motor. Some of the other bits need to be put on there too, a couple more bolts, and then you can screw it in place to actually make it function later on. So just like the actual starter motor, there is one for the alternator as well. There is a little electric motor, or maybe even an alternator in here too. A couple of wires need to be connected up to it. A couple more pulleys need to be installed for some of the belts to be put on there later. And of course it is needed to be screwed onto the block as well. I believe that this is the water pump that also has some functional bits on the inside, and I think you could maybe even have this actually working once all of the pulleys and belts are on, but for now it just looks like a bit of a display piece with some parts on the inside to resemble how this would actually function. The first timing chain guide is now installed, and we can move on to actually timing the engine with the camshafts, of course, and the timing pulleys by correctly putting the chain on there and also putting it on the underside, and then putting everything in place and also installing the other side of the timing chain guide. The final pulley is then also installed and we can start adding the belts. And with the two belts now installed, I need to tension it as well, just so they don't slip off really easily. I can then put on the actual oil filter. This is just a part that looks like one and screws in place the same way, but it's a really nice detail. Finish off some parts on the front side of the engine, then install some of the engine management and also a battery on the front with a switch to actually turn it on and off. Connect the two wires together via the connectors, of course, and the engine already started running. So if you have followed all of the instructions correctly, aligned everything as it should have been, and added the lubricant where it needed to be, the engine should be functional, or at least functional in a display purpose kind of way, with a teaching and instructing side to it. This was a really fun build. It took a couple of hours, and I really enjoyed myself and would like to build more of the engines that Sterling Kit offers in the future. If you are interested in one of these kits for yourself, or maybe know of someone that could use this to teach some other people, I will be leaving the links in the description down below. Thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed this short one-day build, and I'll see you on the next one.